The dusk sank slow over the valley, the kind of fading light that makes everything look older than it is. My porch light flickered once, fighting off the first touch of night, and the bridge beyond the yard groaned like it had a secret. I was halfway through a mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, listening to the insects tune up when the deep, uneven growl started. Then came the rattle. A heavy truck, a cement mixer by the sound, lumbered down the hill and hit the bridge like a fist. The boards clapped and flexed, a hollow, wooden thud echoing up through the porch floorboards into my bones. Every time I sent one of those monsters over, I could feel it in my ribs. I swear I could feel my grandfather's voice too, the one that had told me when I bought this land, "Take care of the bridge." It's the only thing holding this place together. The headlights flashed across the yard, too slow, moving suns dragging their light across the trees. Then the truck's wheels reached the far side, the sound fading into the distance, leaving only the low hiss of settling wood and the echo of anger in my chest. That was the fourth one tonight. It started months ago. Cement trucks, dump trucks, heavy construction rigs cutting through my property because it was the fastest route to the new subdivision on the far ridge. The road belonged to the Homeowners Association, but the bridge, my bridge, wasn't. My grandfather had built it himself before the HOA even existed, back when this land was farmland in Mattapan community. But apparently, what was mine didn't matter much when the HOA decided convenience trumped ownership. At first, I'd done the reasonable thing. Emails. Polite, precise, even a little apologetic. I'd gone to the meetings and stood when they called my name. I'd said, "Excuse me," and if I could just have a minute. But it was like speaking into fog. The board members sat in their neat row, their blazers and neutral smiles all the same shade of practiced calm. Mr. Davis, the president, had that voice that sounded like it should be narrating a car commercial. "We understand your concern, but technically the bridge isn't on a registered private easement," he'd said, adjusting his tie like punctuation. "It's an informal crossing, and the trucks have authorization from the developer." Informal crossing. I could have laughed. My grandfather spent 2 summers building that bridge. I had a photo somewhere. Him in overalls, holding a hammer like a flag. He'd signed his name under one of the planks. You can still see it if you crawl underneath E-Carver, 1957. That bridge was the oldest thing still standing on this land. So I sent another email. They replied with a copy-paste paragraph about temporary construction traffic. I called. They didn't answer. I wrote a letter with photos showing the cracked boards and the warped supports, and the next week they sent more trucks. I'd tried decency. I'd tried reason. Now, watching the dust rise off the bridge under the weight of yet another load, I felt something different. Something steadier than anger. It wasn't the kind of fury that wanted to yell or throw things. It was colder, more deliberate. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The red light blinked as the mixer rolled off the far end of the bridge, its back end swaying like it was laughing at me. The sound of the boards groaning under the tires filled the recording, a long, etching note that would make anyone with sense flinch. I'd send it to them later, sure, but that wasn't evidence anymore. I wasn't gathering audience. The night settled thick around me. I walked down the steps and along the path to the bridge, my flashlight cutting through the dark. The boards looked tired. Grayed wood, old nails, a few fresh scars where heavy tires had bitten too deep. I pressed my palm against one of the rails, feeling the tremor still running through it. "You're hanging in there, old girl," I murmured. But the water beneath was low, only a shallow stream now, whispering over rocks. If I closed my eyes, I could almost hear the sound the way it used to be when I was a kid. The steady ripple, the hum of cicadas. My grandfather's laugh somewhere behind me. Back then, the bridge wasn't just wood and bolts. It was the line between home and the rest of the world. A truck backfired somewhere in the distance, and I opened my eyes. I took out a small notepad from my jacket pocket and scribbled down the license plate I'd caught in the video. It didn't matter that I had a dozen already. Routine gave shape to the frustration. A light flicked on across the creek. My neighbor, Leela, leaned out from her porch, her silver hair catching the glow. "That another one," I said. "Guess they think you'll give up." "Guess they don't know me," as she chuckled. "They will." I smiled at that. Leela had been an art teacher before she retired, the kind of woman who could turn a protest into a parade. She'd once painted her mailbox pink and covered it in glitter after the HOA sent her a warning about non-standard color palettes. They hadn't said a word since. "Come by tomorrow," I told her. "I've got an idea." "Dangerous or brilliant?" she asked. "Somewhere in between in salute. My favorite kind." When her light went out, I stood alone again, listening to the woods breathe. Somewhere an owl hooted, low and steady, and the crickets kept time like a metronome. I ran my hand over the rough surface of the nearest plank. The grain was splintered but strong. My grandfather had chosen oak because he said it phages with stubbornness. I'd inherited more than the bridge from him. I turned back toward the house, the flashlight beam swinging across the weeds that had crept up along the path. Halfway up the porch steps, I paused and looked back. The bridge sat under the pale wash of moonlight, quiet now, like a wounded thing resting after a fight. I felt a tug in my chest, not pity, not nostalgia, but resolve. They thought they could run me over the same way they ran their trucks, heavy, careless, confident nothing would push back. But I'd learned something watching them. If you can't outmuscle the weight, you redirect it. Make it fall where it hurts. I took out my phone again and opened my contacts. First, I texted Lila a simple message, meet me to bring your imagination. Then I scrolled further, found the number of the county inspector, who'd once mentioned his daughter was in Lila's art class. I smiled. A network was already there, just waiting for the right spark. Inside the house smelled of cedar and dust. I set the coffee mug in the sink, still half full, and sat down at the kitchen table. A legal pad waited there, blank except for the date. I started writing. Not an angry letter this time. A list. People might loan folding tables. Who would paint? Who had connections at the local paper? The kind of list you make when you stop asking for fairness and start planning for spectacle. By the time the clock hit midnight, the page was full. I tore it out carefully, folded it in half, and tucked it under my grandfather's old hammer on the windowsill. The metal felt cool under my palm. Outside, the bridge was just a shadow against the darker shadow of the woods. Another truck might come before dawn, but I didn't care. Let them drive. Let them rumble and shake the boards a little more. They wouldn't know it yet, but every pass they made was one step closer to their own undoing. I turned off the porch light and stood there a moment, the sound of the river barely audible. The stars were faint but stubborn, blinking through the haze like they had something to prove. Tomorrow, I said softly to the night, to the bridge, to myself, we start making noise. You said. Morning came with a slant of gold through the blinds and the smell of damp earth after a week rain. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in one hand, notepad in the other, rereading the list I'd made the night before. Half the names had question marks beside them, but that didn't matter. A plan didn't have to start perfect. It just had to start. The first call went to Lila. She answered on the second ring, her voice already bright. View still walking the line between dangerous and brilliant. Leaning a little toward brilliant this morning, I said, you free around noon? Always. What are we building? I hesitated, looking out the window at the bridge, washed clean by the rain. Something that makes the trucks think twice, and makes the HOA skirm without giving them a single reason to call the cops. That's art. She said, and hung up. Next I called Hank, the guy who fixed everyone's lawnmowers for free and collected scrap wood like it was treasure. Then Mrs. Duffy from the bakery, who had more local pull than the mayor because she supplied muffins to every committee in town. By the time I finished the fifth call, I had enough volunteers to fill a small parking lot. Around lunchtime, Lila's old Greekup rolled into my drive, the bed piled high with paint cans, tarps, and what looked like a collection of battered wooden pallets. She climbed out wearing overalls splattered with half a century of color and a grin sharp enough to cut rope. Your message said bring imagination, she said, hoisting a bucket from the back. 5 brought leftovers from every art project I ever regretted. We spread everything out on the porch table. Pallets, brushes, spray paint, even a couple of old banners from the high school's homecoming parade. I poured coffee for both of us, and she leaned over the map of the property I'd drawn the night before. Because it's the shortest route to the ridge, right? She asked. Yeah. The alternative is the county road, adds 10 minutes to every trip. Too expensive, they said. So what if we make your bridge famous? I blinked. Famous? Sure. People avoid private property all the time, but if it's art, public art, they'll need permission, press releases, permits. The HOA hates attention. They like control. She grinned. Let's give them the opposite. It took in my head for the idea to take shape in my head. I could already see it, not a blockade, not a protest. Something performative, legal, impossible to punish. A community event. By mid-afternoon, we were driving around town, recruiting. At the bakery, Mrs. Duffy wiped her hands on her apron and listened while I explained the plan. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. So you're telling me we're turning that bridge into a stage, she said. More like a canvas. Well, honey, I'll bring cookies for the crowd. At the hardware store, Hank donated half a dozen old pallets and a roll of caution tape. Use this. He's slapping it into my hands. Looks official enough to confuse him. We stopped by the high school art room next. The teacher, a wary woman named Rowan, was thrilled by the idea. The kids would love that, she said. They've been wanting a real project. Something that means something. By 5 o'clock, the plan had grown wings. What started as my private irritation had become a neighborhood conspiracy. humming with laughter and shared purpose. People promised to show up Saturday morning at the old municipal lot. Leela promised to design signs. Rowan promised to bring her students. Mrs. Duffy promised coffee and cookies. But the HOA must have caught the scent of rebellion faster than I expected. That evening, as the sun slid down behind the trees, my phone chimed. The email subject line read, "Notice of potential violation." I opened it. "Dear Mr. Carver, it has come to our attention that you may be organizing an unauthorized event involving shared community property. Please be advised that such actions may constitute trespass or violation of local ordinances. We strongly urge you to refrain from any illegal or unsafe activity. Respectfully, the Oak Hollow Board of Directors." I read it twice, then laughed. The tone was perfectly dry, perfectly smug. They weren't scared yet, but they were watching. Leela, who was sitting on the porch railing sketching ideas in her notebook, looked up. "They sent a love letting her the phone," I said, handing her the phone. She read it, then drew a little heart next to the signature line. "Means they're paying attention," she said. "Good. Art doesn't work without an audience." We spent the rest of the evening at my kitchen table, drafting mock-ups. Leela sketched arches, banners, and a layout for wooden molds shaped like waves and bridges. "If we get the kids to pour the mix into these," she said, "it'll look symbolic enough to confuse every lawyer in a 5-mile radius." I couldn't help grinning. "You've done this before. Though I've made a few bureaucrats sweat," she said. "But this'll be my masterpiece." By midnight, the plan was done. It wasn't sabotage. It was civic theater. A registered public art demonstration, complete with volunteer waivers and a request for a temporary use permit. I filled out the online forms, attaching a smiling photo of Leela holding a paintbrush. The county clerk, a friend of hers, would process it in the morning. We sent out texts before we turned in for AM municipal lot. Bring gloves, color, and a sense of humor. The next day brought a strange kind of energy to the neighborhood. People I'd barely spoken to before were suddenly waving, asking what they could bring. The rumor spread fast, something about an art show, a community event, maybe even a festival. The HO board tried to clamp down, sending a second email about non-approved gatherings. But the message just fueled the curiosity. By Thursday, even the local paper had called me. "We heard there's going to be a community sculpture unveiling." The reporter asked. "Something like that," I said, careful to keep my tone calm. "It's a collaboration. Ave and the HOA," she asked, amused. "Especially them." Friday evening, the municipal lot looked like a makeshift workshop. Kids painted wooden planks with bright blues and yellows, spelling out words like home and British in crooked letters. Leela orchestrated it all with the poise of a maestro, shouting encouragement, laughing, correcting brushstrokes. Someone set up a speaker, and music drifted through the air, an old rock song about taking roads less traveled. The air buzzed with shared defiance, not anger, not really. Something lighter. People weren't protesting, they were creating. And for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't standing alone against a wall of bureaucracy. As the last bit of daylight faded, I stood at the edge of the lot and watched the colors dry on the wood. My bridge would become a symbol tomorrow, whether the HO liked it or not. Leela came to stand beside me, her hands on her hips. "You realize they're going to lose their minds," she said. "I'm counting on it." She grinned. "You sure you're not an artist? Of just someone who got tired of being ignored?" She nodded. "That's where art begins." Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I walked down to the bridge again. The moonlight shimmered across the water, the boards quiet under my steps. For once, the night felt peaceful, like the calm before a show, the hush before the first curtain rises. I could almost hear my grandfather chuckle, knowing sound he made when he saw me doing something foolish but admirable. "Grandpa," I said softly, running my hand along the railing. "They're going to learn what happens when they mess with Carver wood." Somewhere in the distance, another truck growled to life, maybe preparing for its early route across my bridge. But this time I smiled. Let them come. Tomorrow, the stage would be set, and the whole town would be watching.